So, this is going to be an unscripted video, which has been all my videos so far, so that's not really much of a difference. And it's going to be about kind of my, I want to say, feelings or interpretations and stuff regarding the completely currently irrelevant Five Nights at Freddy's books. So, if you don't know, there are, I can't off the top of my head, about 6 book sets, give or take. 7 book sets. So you've got the Charlie novels, which were the original trilogy, that were made back in the series' infancy. Then we started getting the guides, which was certainly something. We then started getting, I don't know what to call them. I guess like workout books, I'm gonna call them. Basically books that are like semi-set in the universe, like not even necessarily books, but just like physical things you can buy that are important and set in the continuity. Then we got the first set of anthology books in the Frights books, the second set of anthology books in Tales, and then we had the interactive novels. And there's also the movie novelizations, but they're less important. So, these all are kind of weird. So, the novels made sense. Scott had 4 games at the time, and he wanted to do something different without having to sort of balance all those games, and so he made the novels. The novels are not set in the continuity, they were never intended to be set in the continuity, and anything that crosses over is few and far between. Like, there's very little that you can use the novels to solve in the games. They mostly just give a further look into characters who aren't really present in the games in the same way. The way we know William entirely comes from what the novels show us of William, because it's the closest to the character we've ever gotten the opportunity to get, barring just straight up voice lines. Everything we know about Henry, for the most part, comes about the novels, even if a lot of people misinterpreted it, in my opinion. Etc. Stuff like Charlie dying in 1983 is from the novels, but it's also a retcon from the novels, which makes it which is why people can use, in my opinion, people use it for theorizing. There's also Molten MCI, but there is evidence within the games for that as well. For the most part, theorizing with the novels doesn't really lead anywhere. Again, Molten MCI and Charlie 83 are the only real theories that are likely that have came from the novels, and even then, the games still have very much differences, so I wouldn't use them as a direct start of evidence, especially since both of which are not true in other continuities, or at the very least I know Charlie 83 isn't. Yeah, they were fairly simple though. It just added more. They gave a bit of an explanation as to what the nightmares may have been, but also the Twisteds aren't really anything like the nightmares, so it's kind of whatever. I got milk. Then there was the guidebooks. I don't know how many guidebooks there are, but I know you really should not trust a single one of them. I can't say all the different things off the top of my head, but I know for a fact that the Character Encyclopedia guidebook claims the character Bon Bon, first appearance Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, or otherwise known as Five Nights at Freddy's 5, is stated as appearing in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, which they don't. I know that I think the first guidebook claims that the ball pit present in Into the Pit was a time-travelling ball pit. It wasn't. Like, there's many things in the guidebooks that are just inaccurate. That makes it so you really shouldn't use them for theorising either. Which, when you see them as being kind of like a catalogue of like theories, it's less egregious, but then there's still things like Chica's Secret Party and, again, Bonbon in FNaF 3 that make you think, okay, so these are just unreliable as hell. The puzzle stuff, you know, Tickets for Fun, the logbook, they're weird. They're very clearly in some way directly tied to direct continuity and should be used for lore. I may not like all the implications that come from it, and I may not agree with and I may have my own explanations for the things that come from it, like the Jeremy Fitzgerald like paycheck being in the possession of Mike Schmidt, which implies they're the same character. It's very strongly implied that Jeremy is the one who loses his frontal lobe and is therefore hospitalized, whereas Mike is all but confirmed in the logbook to be Mike Afton, and likely makes it up to, at bare minimum, FNaF 3, probably FNaF 6 as well. But ultimately, you do. I will say you do still need to take it as this is information, you have to work with it, because this is actually just direct, like, giving you stuff. It's how we know Charlie died at Freddy's, it's how we know Mike Schmidt is likely Mike Afton, and it was what allowed us to 100% confirm that yes, Mike Schmidt was in fact the one in FNaF 4. FNaF 4 did tell us this, but we're kind of stupid. We're kind of stupid. Then there's the fun ones. I'm going to ignore the movie novels because they're kind of their own weird thing. Like, they're slightly accurate and slightly inaccurate at the same time. Like, they're not accurate in the movies. They add a lot of weird details. Like, about Charlie having had multiple families before Henry, who we're given no reason to believe is her adopted father. Like, in every other continuity, they've been biological. There was no reason to assume that that was a thing, and it was never mentioned in the movie. Likewise, Doug was kind of weird and pervy in the first novel, at least in its first release. I believe they removed that, but that wasn't in the movie either. So I'd say take those with a grain of salt when trying to use them for theories as well. However, they're less related because the movies themselves are kind of weird when it comes to trying to do theories with them. I think you can do it, but I think they more so function to let you learn more about characters, kind of like what ifs about characters, you know. Things like Vanessa acting kind of how she does in the therapy CDs ish in the movies, and Michael kind of feeling like if Mike Afton in the games didn't have a redemption arc, and Mike Schmidt in the movies being kind of if Mike Afton didn't have William, sort of thing. But overall, I'd say try not to use the movies as well. The anthology series is where we get fun. I kind of fuse both Tales and Frights into one. I'd just call them the anthology series. Oh my lord, they are annoying. I don't understand. Like, I can understand the concept behind them, okay? Scott sees that we want direct answers, sees that we want answers, more accurately. We want answers about things, we want answers about stuff. He also wants to write some more interesting stories that don't necessarily have to revolve around Freddy's. So he thinks, oh, okay, I'm going to make this anthology series. It's not going to be directly, like, in the continuity of the games, but it will have answers in it, like, through subtext. And, I'll be able to write what I want, and the games will but still give answers. The issue is he never actually told us that. He just told you that some are directly connected to the games and some are not, and that means so many different things depending on how you read it. Is what we found directly connected to the games because it is sort of a retelling of FNaF 3 but with different events? Or is The Man in Room 1280 directly connected to the games because it sort of functions as a sequel to Ultimate Custom Night, with basically no real big continuity kerfuffles between them? When you don't, the series is annoying because they didn't give the full picture. If they gave the full picture, no issue. But they didn't. They didn't give the full picture until Secret of the Mimic released, which was quite a bit after Fright started. Because it happened quite a while after Fright ended, because Tales had started by the time Secret of the Mimic started. Hold on, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to flip this mask, this is really itchy. I've had to wear this, like, for an extended period of time in ages. I forgot how itchy the seam on it was. Where was I? But yeah, so it was just very, 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 probably a few more varies stupid in how it tried to handle continuity. And I think, and it winds up being really annoying to work with, especially now. Because now if you say want to go and look, well, because now no one's really talking about it. No one cares about Frights anymore, or Tales. Because we know that whatever they were working with isn't in the game's continuity, and so for most people they don't really care as much. And that's fine. It makes sense not to care anymore. But I feel like there's still more you can get out of it. Like Room for One More, for example. Room for One More is, as far as I'm aware, I may be very wrong on this, so take what I say with a gigantic grain of salt. I haven't gotten to that book yet. But as far as I'm aware, Room for One More kind of is implied to take place in around the 2000s. And given that it is a soft retelling of Sister Location, or a soft sequel, or a soft whatever, it's Sister Location. It's someone going down to Sex, Babies, Entertainment and Rentals every day, and the animatronics, in that story's case the mini Rena's, escaping through his body. It could imply that Sister Location is around the 2000s. Do I like that implication? Not really. I believe Vanessa's an Afton and that she was probably born in 2005, but if that's the implication we get, that's the implication we get. And you kind of have to work with that. But no one really looks at the books like that anymore because we know they're not in continuity. The most people look at it is vaguely like yelling about Andrew, fist to the skies, Andrew, one you shouldn't have killed. It's kind of boring. I'd just love to see more theorizing about it, but regardless, the books did a horrible job what they were trying to do. But one thing I think people are kind of sleeping on is the idea of trying to solve the Frights timeline and the Tales timeline themselves. As in, ignore the games. The games don't matter in this situation. Just solve Frights and Tales. That's it. It's actually weirdly interesting to do. For example, but this is me merging both of them, by the way. So, working out through taking what is said in the Mimic literally now, rather than doing what was happening when that story first came out, where people were kind of ignoring what was being said because they didn't want to believe it, and because it kind of screwed with their interpretation of the timeline because they were trying to mix it into the games. Trying not to mix it into the games, you can place the Mimic, the story, in, I believe I put it in 1980, I believe, with the storyteller happening in 2020, since Edwin is, I believe, 29 in the Mimic. I know a lot of people think he's 24. What the book actually says is that he was 24 when his son was born. Not that he was 24 when, like, the story took place. It might not be when his son was born, but he was 24 in the past when he was with Fiona still, before she died in childbirth. He's 29 in the story itself. So 2020 can be when you put my mind goes blank so much. When you put the storyteller takes place, I believe, in the second year of the Pizzaplex. I mean, the Pizzaplex now opens in 2019. Therefore, you have quite a bit of time to fit the entirety of Frights in. And since you don't have to fit games around it and try and work with the established continuity of that, you can do more. I mean, here's an example. We know in Ditophobia that Rory was likely kidnapped around the mid to late 90s, since he knows what the internet is but doesn't yet know of traceable phone calls, meaning that the story Ditophobia takes place in the 2000s. Rory was held captive for a couple of months before it was all basically shut down and left on autopilot. Now, there are two theories as to what is happening from there. Theory number one is that Rory is escaping and actually speaking to his friend, and that William disappeared back in the 90s. Therefore, Follow Me, or the equivalent of Follow Me, would have to happen in the 90s, meaning that you have from the 90s to 2019 for when What We Found can take place. An alternative explanation is that the person who Rory speaks to on the walkie-talkie, who he thinks is his friend, is William, doing some sort of weird voice. And in fact, William was spring locked some point after this point in the 2000s, meaning that he would be spring locked probably in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Both are really interesting because, again, it shortens the amount of time span. If I had to guess, he was probably spring locked in around the 90s. Main reason being, you need at least 8 years if you assume that Jake McNally from Fetch is Jake from the real Jake. If you make that assumption, you need at least 9 years. Not 9 years, you need at least 8 years. Free before the Pizzaplex shows up, because you need, if we assume that Fetch happens the same year as the Man in Room 1280, you need the Man in Room 1280 to happen. Big Willie's body blows up. Fetch goes out. Jake McNally's 4. Then 5 years pass. Jake, assumedly McNally, is now 9. The real Jake happens. He dies of cancer, and then 3 years later, Jake is the Stitch Wraith and the Stitch Wraith Stingers. So if you assume that Jake is Jake McNally, you need that 8-year time span. And as such, I would hazard a guess to assume that likely construction of the Pizzaplex wasn't happening simultaneously, which early 2010s would require, since I believe the Tales epilogues happen like a year before the Pizzaplex opens. Like the year before, so in this case 2018, so if it was 2010, the end of Frights would happen the same year as the epilogues of Tales. So I personally prefer to put a bit more of a gap between it and say that William probably did disappear in the 90s and that what we found probably takes place in the 2000s. But I can very well be wrong. There's 1,000 different ways you can do it, but no one really cares to do it that way. You can really tell it's unscripted. It's like a complete different topic that I was talking about at the start. But yeah, just I think Frights and Tales, on account of them now being confirmed to be not in the continuity of the games, people have kind of slept on the potential of theorizing within them, both through using the information that's there and also just trying to work out its lore. Like, people do that with the movies. They'll try and figure out the movie's lore. Not to the same extent as the games, but they still try. You don't really get that with Tales and Frights, and I think it's because people had this pre-established idea. That idea was proven wrong, and then people kind of got sick of it, which I can't blame them, but, you know, I still find it cool. I still find the idea cool. Like, Andrew might be Golden Freddy in that continuity. Is that true? Probably not. But, no. The corpse inside the Golden Freddy suit in the new kid is described as having the curly black hair, just like Andrew. It's worth... It's worth making that sort of guesstimate, assumption, whatever word you'd use. I think it's still worth it. Give it a go. See if it fits. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I still need to read the new kid. I'm not that far in. This makes it sound like I barely read. I'm trying my best. I don't have a long attention span. I think I'm on the 3rd book. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm on the 3rd book. I think I'm midway through 135A. Hold on. The books aren't in there anymore. I moved them under my bed. I think I'm midway through 1:35 a.m. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I am. I have read the ending of In the Flesh because I found that funny. But I just want to see more. Moving away from the anthology books, because otherwise I will go on a multi-hour long rant and it is getting slightly dark, and I don't want to be shrouded in the darkness before videos end, because I would have to turn the light on, and I'm using my phone to do that, and my phone is the thing that turns my light on. Interactive novels. If you ask me, they seem to be in the games to some extent. I'm not 100% sure to what extent, but they seem to be in the games. I can't judge on VIP because I do not have it. I know it's a free book on Amazon, but I'm not gonna lie, when I tried to do it last time, I could not figure it out. I might just be dumb. Probably am. Would not be surprised. I will read it at some point. I just need to figure out how to work it. The week before, from what I've read of it so far, which isn't a lot because, again, I have poor attention span, but from what I've read of it, it seems to work in canon. My explanation for it is probably, I don't like loop theory. It's a theory that came from the Interspit game, which I'm going to talk about at the end. But I don't like loop theory for the most part. I think it kind of functions as a to what is and isn't in continuity. But I do think the week before seems to be some kind of loop, entirely because the only way you can get the canonical ending, as in the ending that you know is canonical because it's the one you hear in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, is by playing twice. Um, Return to the Pit, I do not have a very strong thing leaning one way or the other. I would hazard a guess that what Squawk said in his most recent video is probably right, about it being that Oswald's kind of trapped in the pit for the entirety of the story. Though I could also interpret, like, but there's also 1,000 other interpretations you can get from it. It's really confusing because it has slightly different rules than a lot of other stuff follows. The pit's weird. The pit's like a weird memory ball pit, but it appears to be time travel if you're looking from an outside perspective. My interpretation is that yes, it is a memory pit and that he is going through memories, which is why things change, whether it be once out of the pit people's memories are changed, or once out of the pit you're not out of the pit until the yellow rabbit is killed. As for Escape the Pizzaplex, I have absolutely no idea. I cannot speak clearly on that one. I have that book, but it's the only one that I have literally never opened in my life. Mainly because I was trying to go through them one by one from the week before. And then my computer collapsed in on itself and I was left with no computer to do the week before because I was writing down all my notes on the computer. I fixed the computer, but I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. What do you want from me? I'm got no attention. Jeez, I felt like a shrimp then. Yeah. Right, Into the Pit game, last thing. Into the Pit game is not canon. I've been saying it since the game came out. It is not canon. I refuse to, like, say, yeah, it's canon. Yeah, it makes sense. It's canon. It makes sense. It doesn't. Into the Pit game is so filled with references and Easter eggs that are meant to invoke all corners of the franchise that to say that it is canonical requires you to cherry pick information. It just does. When you play the Into the Pit game, you have to go, like, I remember when the game was like fairly new and for a while after it was new, the one thing I would always hear people say whenever I would say I don't think it's canon because of, what's an example off the top of my head? GGY. I said I don't think it's canon because GGY is referenced in it. GGY implies Gregory's been in the ball pit either during Secret of the Mimic, not during Secret of the Mimic, either during his time as Dr. Rabbit, as Tails put at the time, where he was under the Mimic's control. Which, if that's the case, you'd think the Mimic might make reference to it, or Bear Trap, or whatever. Or it gives the impression that a non-mimicked Gregory went in there, which he doesn't mention, that he himself does not mention. Therefore, there is nothing suggesting that that has happened. Therefore, I don't think it's canon. I got the response consistently of, it's because you need to look at it with, it was like, it's common sense what isn't canon. And my thought process was, no, you're picking what isn't canon. You don't want to, like, live in the reality that I'm presenting you, that if you assume this game is canon, Gregory at some point has been in the ball pit and just never mentions it or never, like, infers towards it in any way, both as Dr. Rabbit and as Gregory. And because you don't believe that that's the case, because that would be ridiculous, you're now saying, no, that's obviously a bit that's non-canon, that's just an Easter egg. A canonical aspect is the fact that the Stitch Wraith appears. But I can just as easily say the fact that the Stitch Wraith appears is very clearly just a little Easter egg, the same way GGY is. And in fact, the fact that, I don't know, a Circus Baby poster appears in Freddy's means that clearly Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental opened pre-MCI. Or like there's 1,000 different arguments that you can make, but regardless, that's kind of like my point with Into the Pit game, is that it's kind of hard to it's simple in the sense of you can describe what's going on and you can say whether it's ridiculous sounding or not, but fundamentally, if you're working with the assumption that the game is canonical, there's a lot of things you have to overlook for it to work, which is why I've never considered it canonical. I will say there is parts of the game that I consider canonical. However, I instead run with more of a system for that, rather than just going off of what feels obvious or not obvious, or what makes my theory upheld rather than flushed down the toilet. My mindset for it is, in the previous Five Nights at Freddy's games, the main way you could tell if something was canonical was if it was a secret Atari-style minigame. So I only include those. So for me, it would be the Balloon Boy minigame where you can find the 6th like party hat that gets thrown outside the level. My interpretation of that is Charlie, because I'm Mr. Charlie is obviously the 6th, because she's always presented as being the 6th in the modern games. That's not because she is an MCI kid, that's because she is very closely associated with them in the games. That would also include the Eleanor one, which to me just says Eleanor is in the game's continuity. Wow, what a shocker. But that seems like it would be an obvious thing. It's not really, but that's my interpretation. Eleanor's in the game somewhere, doing something. The Count the Ways game implies Count the Ways in some way happened. Just like to some extent, based on the fact that I think there was slushies in that mini game. It's been a while since I've seen it, but since there was slushies in that mini game, I'm going to make the assumption that it was at one of the parties that they mentioned that the rental service does, rather than being just Freddy being abandoned. And I will also go out of my way to say I'm assuming Bonbon's possessed. Is that stupid? Probably, but it's interesting. It's like the only implication I can get out of the fact that they only used Bonbon, like, rather than just sitting Funtime Freddy down, like having his head there. Instead, use Bonbon. Yeah. And then the final mini game would be the fetch mini game, which is really weird to me. So there's 6 balloons that you can find. One secret balloon you can find that turns the colour purple. There's a fetch that attacks you when you show it the 6 balloons. And there's Golden Freddy that's still active. My interpretation of that comes down to me, like, who I believe is the receiver, who I believe the one who should not have killed is. I think that the fact that Golden Freddy's still around shows that either Golden Freddy, in my opinion, it shows that at the very least the spirit within Golden Freddy has not moved on, which to me puts the spirit that has moved on as being the bite victim. Again, the 6th MCI for me is Charlie, and so picking up the balloons, which are the things that lift off during Happiest Day, tells us that the 6th that I picked up are those who moved on. If Golden Freddy's still present, then the one secret one would have to be the bite victim, because it's the only conclusion that really makes sense. it also fits with the fact that back in FNaF World, that was something that was presented. 6 gravestones, one thing, one that's pushed off to the side. I don't remember where that was. I think it was in like a weird Halloween looking thing. I don't know if it was for like a Halloween update or what, but it was like some weird graveyard area. Gosh, that's gonna annoy me now if I don't remember. Either way, 6 gravestones in FNaF World, one off to the side. My interpretation of that is that the bike victim is sort of like a 7th victim, not killed by William, but still involved with the MCI, but distantly. Like, not one that you would consider when you count the MCI up. And as such, he appears, just further exemplified by the fact that the thing turns purple, which is, you know, the Afton family, purple, makes sense. And Fetch, therefore, would most likely in a continuity where I assume Andrew doesn't exist. I may be wrong on that. Andrew, in my opinion, is just as likely to exist as he is to not exist. He's a permanent state of both. But assuming that Fetch doesn't have Andrew, that would only leave William, since William was also technically a part of Fetch, I'm pretty sure. So I'm tired, if you can't tell. Yeah, well, that's all my thoughts, just blurted out. I had nothing to do, I was so bored. How often do you get a mug and fill it with milk because you are bored, thirsty, and want to go to bed? Like, I was literally sitting down there. Initially, I've went outside, cleaned like the entire garden up because it's gonna rain tomorrow, midway through the day. So I've basically got nothing to do tomorrow either. I probably should have left that. I should have left that up. That would have made my life a bit easier. Tidied up the house because I had nothing to do. Because the only way I can watch YouTube without losing my is through the computer, and I was very much done with watching stuff on the computer because I'm not watching. Like, I don't know if Iron Lung's scary. I've yet to see it, but I bought it recently. And if it is scary, I am not watching that when I'm home alone. I'm gonna wait till my sister's back. Bare minimum. So I just had nothing to do. Probably should have watched Peacemaker. I was planning on doing that at some point, but I didn't. I made myself a mug of milk and started working myself up about the Five Nights at Freddy's anthology. I'm talking way too much for a video that has nothing to do with me. I'm sorry for anyone who decided they wanted to watch this. I feel bad for you. I hope it was like moderately entertaining at bare minimum. I hope you enjoyed doing your dishes. It's the only reason why I'd have something like this on, I feel like. Right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for like listening to me rant about stuff that you probably don't care about, or if you do care about, the extra stuff about how I'm feeling, what like I know you don't care about, you don't know who I am. So thank you. I'm gonna go to bed now. I'm tired. I need to get pajamas on. Good night.